HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Grub-and-Stakers House a Haunt by Charlotte MacLeod, read by Lory Reyes.
Chapter 1. Widows were scarce in Lobelia Falls, Ontario. Mrs. Zilla Trott might therefore have been regarded as something of a rarity, not that she couldn't have made it into the rarity class on her own merits. Tonight, sensibly dressed for a brisk October evening in leather scuffs, heavy wool socks, a long red flannel nightgown, a pink crocheted bed jacket, and a matching cap that sat jauntily on her abundant, close-cropped gray hair, she had added an old blue sweater of her late husband's to her ensemble and stepped out into the backyard to salute the harvest moon. Her cat, Nemea, had followed dutifully at Zilla's well-protected heels. Their brief moonwalk completed, Nemea had followed Zilla back into the kitchen without demur, hiss, spit, or catly cuss. At the moment, Nemea was sitting on the drain board watching Zilla put her soybeans to sprout, and Zilla was worried. "What's got into you tonight, Nemea? Why didn't you stay out a while and go helling around with the rest of the cats, eh? I hope you're not coming down with something." Nemea certainly didn't look to be ailing. She'd been named, not inappropriately, for the Nemean lion. A fine, strapping figure of a feline, she was bigger than most cats, unless you counted lynxes and pumas, which even the most ardent cat lovers are often reluctant to do. Nemea's eyes were huge and green. They bore an inscrutable glint that had cowed many dogs, and not a few humans. Her fur was a rich copper-gold color with streaks of strawberry roan. Thanks to all the wheat German yogurt with which Zilla supplemented Nemea's carefully balanced diet, and possibly also to the odd mouse or chipmunk she added on her own hook, the magnificent animal's pelt fairly glistened. She was gleaming now in the lamplight. Her eyes were bright as emeralds, her pink nose was moist, her fine stand of whiskers showed not the barest hint of a droop. Yet Nemea couldn't fool her keen-eyed mistress. She was not a happy cat. "I guess likely what I'd better do is make us both a nice cup of chamomile tea." Zilla put a lot of faith in chamomile. She grew her own, of course. She filled the kettle, little recking what a handsome picture she made, with the lamplight picking out coppery reflections on the high-bridged nose that revealed her part Cree heritage. She put another stick in the wood stove, for the night was chill, and she wanted the fire to hold over till morning. She was just setting the kettle on the front lid when she heard from behind her a rather tentative boo. People didn't lock their doors much in Lobelia Falls. Zilla naturally assumed this must be one of the neighbors' kids practicing up for Halloween. She whirled around, all set to fling up her hands and exclaim, "My stars and garters," as protocol demanded. However, her ensuing amazement was totally unfeigned. There on her well-scrubbed linoleum stood an elderly man whom Zilla had never laid eyes on before in all her born days, and could have done nicely without now. His gray mustache was even more striking than Nemea's, but that was the only impressive thing about him. His attire could best be described as rough. His baggy, dark gray trouser legs were stuffed into scuffed old boots with dirt caked on them. His gray flannel shirt had about as much class as a worn-out mop. The dark rag tied around his neck wouldn't have been fit to wipe out a coal bin with, and the billycock felt hat on his grizzled head was an out-and-out disgrace. Zilla's hand snaked out and grabbed the poker from beside the stove. "Boo yourself, you dirty old goat! What's the big idea barging in here unasked and scaring the daylights out of a defenseless widow? Not to mention her cat." Nemea had her back up and her tail bushed out. She was spitting a blue streak, and Zilla didn't blame her. "You just turn around and waltz yourself out of my kitchen before I lam you one with this poker." "That's a hell of a way to talk to company," grunted the interloper. "Ain't you even wondering who I am?" "Not particularly. You don't look like any relative I'd care to own, that's for sure. Unless you're that no-good bum Aunt Jessamine got herself tied to back in 1942. I thought you died of hobnail liver ages ago. I can't remember your name." "Don't make no never mind. I ain't him and never was. I'd 'a' known better than to get myself roped in by any she-devil of a woman." "Huh. What makes you think any woman in her right mind would want you? What are you here for, anyway? There's nothing in the house worth stealing except my family Bible, and I expect that's the last thing you'd want. If you're after a handout, I'll give you some fricassee of tofu and a tumbler of buttermilk, but you'll have to eat it out in the woodshed. And you darn well better not smoke, or I'll turn the hose on you." "Cripes, you're a mean one, you and that red-headed mountain lion you got there. I've been nose to nose with a charging grizzly bear, and that bugger was some ugly. But it couldn't hold a candle to you two." Even so, the man stepped forward. Zilla raised the poker. "You come one step closer, mister, and I'll lay you out flat as a barn door." The gray whiskers swept upward. The old goat was grinning at her. "Go ahead, sister, hit me. I dare you." He took the forbidden step. Healthful diet, hard work, ample exercise, and lots of practice at the archery butts as a member of the Grub-and-Stake Gardening and Roving Club had kept Zilla Trott in the finest of fettle. Her strength was as the strength of 10 on account of all those bean sprouts. She wanged with will and purpose. Great, then, was Zilla's astonishment when the stranger just stood there and took the blow. Greater still was her dismay when the poker encountered no obstacle except her own right shin. "Ouch! You moved, you coward!" "Do it again," the man offered magnanimously. "Thrash away as much as you've a mind to. How about trying a backhander this time? Take a good hold on my chin whisker so I can't turn my head away." Exasperated, Zilla made a grab for the ratty gray beard. Her hand encountered nothing. She swung the poker sideways and again hit nothing. "Well, I'll be gum-swizzled. What is this, anyway? Am I having a nightmare?" "Nope. Take a look at your cat. She knows." Yes, Nemea knew. Suddenly, so did Zilla. "Well, dip me for a sheep. I thought ghosts were supposed to be gray and fuzzy." "I'm gray and fuzzy, ain't I?" "Come to think of it, you are. Wait till I tell Minerva. How long have you been haunting me?" "Oh, I don't know. Us ghosts don't pay no mind to time. I've been out in the woodshed mostly, just kind of mooching around and getting the feel of being a haunt. I forgot where I was before that. Moldering away in some lonesome graveyard, I suppose. How do I look?" "Not too bad, considering." Zilla wasn't exactly warming up to her unexpected visitant, but she was beginning to feel a bit embarrassed about the poker. A hostess did have certain responsibilities, after all. "I don't suppose there's any use offering you a cup of chamomile tea?" "Well, I suppose you might try, though I'm not sure I got any place to put it. Go ahead and have yours. I'll just hang around and watch. Cat gets a snort too, does she?" "Oh, yes. Nemea likes a little cream in hers, though. There you are, Puss. Don't slop it all over the counter. And for goodness sake, unfuzz your tail. He's all right, whoever he is. Do you happen to remember your name, mister?" "Seems to me it might have been Hector or Harvey. No, by gory, it was Hiram. Hiram Jellyby, that was it. Funny how your memory improves once you get off the astral plane. Yup, that was me, Hiram Jellyby. I was a wagon driver by profession. Mules was my specialty. You got any openings for a disembodied mule skinner around here nowadays?" "Not in Lobelia Falls, no. Offhand, I can't think where I last saw a mule team. I'm sorry, Mr. Jellyby. Times change, you know. It's mostly trucks and tractors these days, though in my humble opinion, we do a darn sight less polluting of the environment with more animals and fewer machines. Here, sit down and make yourself comfortable. If you can sit, that is." "I'll give her a go and see how she works. I ain't too up on this manifestin' wrinkle yet." Zilla watched with almost motherly interest while her strange visitor endeavored to accommodate himself to the chair. At first, Hiram showed a tendency to ooze down through the seat, But he gradually got the hang of it and looked quite natural sitting there with a cup of chamomile tea steaming on the table in front of him. He couldn't raise the cup, of course, but he seemed somehow able to absorb the steam. Zilla was fascinated to see the level of tea in the cup begin to subside, millimeter by millimeter. As a former mule team driver, Hiram Jellyby would probably have preferred strong coffee, she thought, maybe with a plate of beans, or a donut. Zilla herself wouldn't touch a donut with a 10-foot pole, unless it happened to be one of Minerva Oakes's. Minerva made the best donuts in town. Perhaps she'd be willing to donate one or two in the interests of psychical research. Zilla wondered why she didn't feel more peculiar sitting here drinking tea with a ghost, particularly with the ectoplasm of somebody she'd never met in the flesh, and more particularly in her nightgown. Not that she wasn't decently covered, though she did hope none of her neighbors would notice the light still on in her kitchen and take a notion to drop by for a chat. Then there was the peeping Tom whom some of the people who lived over near the inn had complained about lately. Strange things had been happening around there ever since Andy McNaster, the former innkeeper, had dashed off to become a movie star. In Zilla's opinion, that new manager, Hedrick Snarf, was no more up to scratch than a cat in mittens. It was a rotten shame Lemuel Pilchard, Andy's former right-hand man, had had that terrible fall so soon after his boss left town. Lemuel was a crackerjack at innkeeping, but it wasn't a job that a person could do well all wrapped up in plaster. Hiram Jellyby must have noticed, or perhaps divined by extrasensory perception, that his hostess's mind was wandering. He broke into her reverie with a quite reasonable question. "Speaking of names, missus, you mind telling me yours?"
"Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Zilla Trott, Mrs. Michael Trott to be precise, though I've been a widow for 30 years. My husband was lost at sea."
In point of fact, the late Mr. Trott had met his demise trying to run the rapids on Big Pussy Toes in a borrowed kayak, while under the influence of some mysterious potion that he and a few friends had cooked up in a borrowed washtub one Victoria Day weekend. But Zilla saw no reason why she couldn't gild the lily a bit, as Mike himself would have done. She was something of a romantic at heart, though a person might not think so to look at her, particularly when she was on the warpath about one thing or another, as she frequently was. It occurred to Zilla that Michael Trott might have taken the trouble to manifest himself in place of this mangy old coot. Perhaps he would when he got around to it. Punctuality had never been Mike's obsession. Zilla had often told him he'd be late for his own funeral. In a way, her prediction had come true. Mike's body hadn't come ashore till more than a week after he'd been drowned, although his would-be rescuers had salvaged the kayak right away. They never did find the paddle. It was thought to have been claimed as salvage by a family of rather tough and rowdy beavers who'd lived downstream. Nobody had wanted to tackle a beaver on the question of prior rights, so the matter had been allowed to drop. Well, that was all water over the rapids now. Unlike her friend Minerva, Zilla wasn't one to keep open house for every wayfaring stranger who wandered along. She was emphatically not keen on having an unkempt specter oozing through her furniture for any extended length of time. A person could hardly come straight out and say so, but she supposed it wouldn't hurt to hint around a little.
"Are you here on business, Mr. Jellyby, or just passing through?"
"Hell, Miss Trott, just call me Hiram. Damned if I know what I'm here for. Wait a minute. Maybe I do. Yep, it's coming. Bones. That's it. Bones."
"Any bones in particular, or just bones in general?"
"My bones, dadgummit. They got to be buried decent so's I can rest in peace like it says on the tombstones. And furthermore, they got to be avenged."
"That's so? How were you planning to avenge them?"
"Cussed if I know, but I'll think of something. First off the bat, somebody's got to locate 'em for me." Zilla snorted.
"Isn't that just like a man? Leave things around and don't remember where you put 'em. Why can't you find the bones yourself, for Pete's sake?"
"You're kind of a cantankerous old besom, ain't you, Zilla? Meanin' no offense, you understand. Don't ask me why I can't find 'em. All I know is what I read in the Akashic record. It says there I was murdered."
"Well, that must have been a surprise. Who do you suppose murdered you?"
"Some ornery sidewinder in a black frock coat and purple gaiters, to the best of my recollection."
"Are you sure about the purple gaiters?"
It was Hiram's turn to snort. "How do you expect me to be sure of anything with a wad of gray fuzz where my brains used to be? Assuming they ever was, which I ain't sure of neither. But it does strike me them gaiters was purple, or maybe kind of purpley blue."
"Or blue with purple polka dots?"
Zilla didn't mean to be sarcastic, but purple gaiters on a murderer were a bit hard to swallow, coming from a mule driver's ghost in the dead of night.
"Was the killer a man or a woman?"
"Man, I think. Could have been a woman, now that you mention it. Some of them dance hall girls was pretty tough babies."
"I can imagine. They'd also be more apt than a man to wear purple gaiters, wouldn't you think? How did you die? Were you shot, stabbed, poisoned, strangled, or hit over the head with something heavy?"
"You left out drowned, smothered, and blown up with dynamite."
"If you'd been blown up with dynamite," Zilla pointed out reasonably, "I shouldn't think there'd have been any bones left to find. Didn't the Akashic record let on what happened, for Pete's sake?"
"Could have, I suppose. I was so cussed mad I plumb forgot to look. All I could think of was getting my mitts on that bugger who done me in."
"But Hiram, didn't it occur to you that your murderer must also be dead by now? I don't know when they stopped driving mule teams around here, but it must have been quite a while back. I'll have to ask Grandsire Koskov. He's our oldest inhabitant in Lobelia Falls. Oldest living inhabitant, anyway," Zilla amended out of politeness. "Grandsire will know if anybody does. He was born in 1894, if my memory serves me."
"Huh, just a kid next to me."
"What year were you born?"
"I don't know. Maybe it'll come to me. Who's out there?"
"Out where?"
Zilla glanced nervously at the door that led to the woodshed.
"I don't hear anything. Maybe I'd better go look."
"Maybe you better not. It's probably a skunk. Anyways, as I started to say, the reason this bugger in the purple gaiters killed me was so that he or she, or maybe it for all I know, could steal my treasure."
"What treasure, Hiram? Your Sunday teeth?"
"Don't get funny, woman. This was a real treasure, dadburn it. Gold pieces, a whole trunk chock full of 'em. I dug it up, me and the mules. They was thirsty, see, and they could smell water close under the sod, so they started digging with their hooves. Mules are a darn sight smarter than they're given credit for. People don't appreciate mules, nor mule drivers neither." The ghost lapsed into moody silence. Zilla wasn't standing for that.
"Never mind the mules. Get on to the treasure. How did you find it?"
"Well, like I was saying, the mules found water, but it was just sort of seeping up and not collecting. So I got a shovel out of the wagon. Us mule drivers never traveled without a shovel, 'cause we never knew when we'd have to dig ourselves out of a hole, or bury a partner that had died of lead poisoning, or rot-gut whiskey, as the case might have been. Anyways, I begun scooping out a good big water hole so's me and the mules could all drink together."
"That was sociable of you."
"Oh, yeah. I used to be a real nice feller. Good looking, too. You should have knowed me back then, Zilla. So like I says, while I was digging, the spade hit something hard, and I seen that it was the corner of a box. So after me and the mules had drunk our fill, I turned 'em loose to graze a while, and just out of curiosity, I begun to dig out the box. I thought at first it was probably a coffin, but it turned out to be just a little thing, no bigger than a crate of canned peaches. Once I got the dirt scraped off, though, I seen it wasn't no crate, but a fancy trunk with bands of iron around it and a big lock on the front."
"My stars, that must have been exciting."
"I'll say it was. The bands was all rusted out from being so near the water, but the box was sound enough, 'cause the wood was covered with waxed canvas. So I guv the lock a whack with the shovel, and it fell right off clean as a whistle. And I opened the box, and there was the treasure, and me out there in the middle of nowhere with no place to spend it.
and nobody to brag to except in a passel of mules that didn't give a damn nohow.
Chapter 2.
So what did you do?
Zilla prompted. Seems to me I hoorah'd around for a while and poured me a snort of red-eye to celebrate. But then I got to thinking. I was ferrying in supplies for the mounted police barracks. I knew if them Mounties caught sight of that there trunk in my wagon, they'd get nosy and make me open it out of general cussedness. You can't trust them Mounties 1 inch when it comes to law and order. They don't give a hoot for nobody. They got to do the right thing irregardless of whose toes they step on. Sure as shootin', they'd know where them gold pieces was robbed from and make me give 'em back to the rightful owner. Hiram fumed a moment in silence, then went on. So what I done was, I cooked myself up a mess of beans and bacon while I waited till the water hole cleared, me and the mules having muddied it up pretty good. Then I filled my water bottles and gave the mules another good drink. Then I took my shovel again and filled in the hole and put back the sod as best I could so's you'd never a knowed there was nothing underneath. Then I made me a little wooden cross and planted it right over where the box was layin', so's it would look like a grave, see? Nobody'd go digging up a grave, but I'd be able to find the right place when I come back to get the treasure. I even carved R.I.P. Hiram on the crossboard. I thought that was a pretty good joke, which just goes to show, don't it?
It was tempting Providence, you old fool. You should have known better.
Why? What would you have done?
Taken the gold to the Mountie barracks and turned it over, of course, like any decent, law-abiding citizen.
Huh. Ask a darn fool question and you get a darn fool answer. Can't trust a woman no more'n you can a Mountie. Always got some bee in their bonnets about doing the right thing.
Yes, Hiram, you've made your point.
Zilla was trying not to yawn.
Get on with your story, can't you?
Ain't much more to tell. I delivered my goods and got my pay. Then I went over to the saloon and downed a few shots of rotgut, 'cause it would have looked funny if I wasn't rory-eyed like the rest. I didn't want to start 'em thinking. Then I turned the wagon around and come back to collect my gold.
Back here to Lobelia Falls, you mean?
Here or hereabouts. This used to be a nice, respectable town, as I remember. These days, I suppose it's a regular Sodom and Gomorrah.
Well, you suppose wrong, Zilla replied tartly. Do you remember any of the people?
Couple of fellas named Honecker from down in the States built theirselves a camp on top of that big hill over yonder. Used to burn off a big tract every year and plant rye on it.
That's a nice surprise, said Zilla. Grandsire Koskoff seems to think the Honeckers lived on salt pork and whiskey.
Hiram Jellyby was amused. Course they did. What do you think they grew the rye for? Fattened a few pigs on the leavings from the still and sold what they couldn't eat or drink. I used to cart 'em over to Scottsbeck, them and the jugs and the carcasses. Nice enough fellas. Talked like they had a mouthful of fried potatoes, but I got so's I could understand most of what they said. Not that it amounted to much. Made theirselves a pretty good pile, then went back to where they come from. Left the rye field to the town and took their still with 'em. Seems to me they was gone a while before that last trip of mine. 'Twouldn't surprise me none if that field of theirs is where I'm buried.
It's a small world, isn't it?
Zilla was half asleep by now. Hiram, like the ancient mariner, wasn't about to relinquish his audience until his tale was told. Wake up, woman, I'm still remembering. What I done was, I took my bearings and drew me a map of where the trunk was buried. This was after I'd filled in over it and riz my cross. When I got to the Mountie barracks, I bummed an envelope off'n their clerk and addressed it to my brother Bill, which I never had one, and asked him to mail it for me in care of the Scottsbeck post office. Scottsbeck used to be a fair-sized town then. You ever been to Scottsbeck?
Certainly. It's our biggest city in Lobelia County now. The post office is a brick building with fancy lanterns out front, and I don't know how many people working inside.
I want to know. I wonder if they still got my letter, waiting for old Bill to pick it up.
Considering the rate of speed at which the post office operates, I shouldn't be surprised, Zilla replied with an indignant sniff. I could go and ask, I suppose, or they might have passed a letter on to the Scottsbeck Historical Society. But you still haven't told me how you got murdered."
"Don't rush me. I'm coming to it. Cripes, this is the first time I've talked to a human since I got my chips cashed in for me. At least you might let a hunt get in a little practice. Ain't hurting you none, am I?" He was keeping her up long past her usual bedtime, and Zilla was feeling the effects of her chamomile tea. Moreover, she was getting stiff from so much sitting, but she supposed it would be an act of charity to let the long mute shade ramble on a little longer. She put another stick of wood in the stove and settled back into her chair.
"No, I'm all right. So you came back to where you'd left the gold. Then what happened?"
"Well, I guess I must have shot my mouth off more'n I meant to that night in the saloon, 'cause when I got near the burying place, I realized some bugger on horseback was trailing me. Wasn't no way I could have lost him on the open prairie with me driving a 4-mule team and a cussed great big freight wagon. So I just kept my shotgun handy in case he showed signs of getting too frisky, and pushed on. 'Twasn't unusual for a lone rider to stay near a team for company on the way and protection in case something happened."
"Like what, for instance?"
"Outlaws, grizzly bears, bad liquor, mean women. You never knew. Anyways, after a while the rider caught up to me. I reached for my shotgun, but all he done was give me a yell and a wave and gallop on ahead. By then I was pretty close to where I'd left the trunk, so I stopped and made camp, figuring to let him get a good ways ahead before I went for the gold. But I'd no sooner got the mules pegged out and the beans in the frying pan when I'll be cussed and be jiggered if that bugger didn't come galloping back."
"My stars and garters," said Zilla. "What did you do?"
"Asked him to haul up and have a bite. Wasn't nothing else I could do. That was the code of the prairies. Them as had gov. So he says thanks and dismounted and hobbled his horse and sauntered over. I threw a few more hunks of bacon in the frying pan, and when I looked up from the campfire, I was staring straight into the barrel of a cussed great big 6-shooter. "Mister," says the stranger, "whereat's this gold you was mouthing off about last night in the saloon?" "Mister," I says right back to him, "that's my business and none of yours." "Mister," he says, "I got 6 bullets in this here shooting iron that says it's mine. You talk or I shoot." "Mister," I says, "you might as well go ahead and pull that trigger," I says, "'cause I ain't talking."
"That was awfully brave."
Personally, Zilla thought Hiram Jellyby had been awfully stupid, considering that the gold wasn't even his in the first place. But that was a man for you every time.
"Weren't you scared?"
"Nah. I knew he didn't mean to kill me, 'cause then he wouldn't know where to find the trunk. I figured I could get the drop on him one way or another once he started digging. But be danged and be jeezled if the bugger didn't go ahead and whang a bullet straight past my left ear."
"Don't tell me you weren't scared then."
"You're darn tootin' I was, but I still wasn't talking. So then the stranger goes to whang his second bullet past my right ear, and just as he pulls the trigger, a horsefly big as a buzzard buzzes along and takes a chomp out of my neck. Without thinking, I jerked my head sideways. You know how you do. The bullet got me spang in the middle of the forehead, and there I was, stretched out on the prairie dead as a doornail. By gory, Zilla, how's that for remembering?"
"Very impressive, Hiram, especially when you're so out of practice."
"Yep, I see it all like as if it was yesterday. Me on the ground with a couple of angels zooming down to pray over me. Or maybe they was horseflies. And him standing over me, cussing a blue streak, 'cause he'd done himself out of finding the gold. Then seems like I was wishing down this long tunnel with a light at the end of it, and a bunch of my dead relatives lined up waiting to shake hands and tell me how surprised they was to see me. They'd all figured that wherever they went, I'd wind up in the opposite direction. As for what's been happening between then and now, it ain't come back to me yet. All I remember is standing in front of that Akashic record, seeing my name writ down in letters of golden fire, and finding out I had unfinished business back where I'd shed my flesh and bones. So here I sit, and here I stay till I'm avenged."
"I'm not so sure about the staying, Hiram," said Zilla. The strain of so much remembering must have thinned you out. You're looking awfully foggy in the middle. Maybe...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?